Oh, a little voice. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
There you go. Okay.
I think so.
So, hello.
Hello.
To start off with, do you want to just say your name and where you are right now?
My name is Ian Carney, and I'm in Dublin, in Ireland.
Hmm.
In
Behind
my
this scenic white wall.
Well, yeah, I'm in my house at the moment, so I kind of have this blank background.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the existential question. The first one that we start off with here is, who are you as a person, as a human being? And you can talk about, your passions, your values, your qualities, whatever you'd like.
Who am I as a person? Um, I kind of see myself as like a seeker, like a kind of I'm very curious. I spend a lot of time like investigating and reading and learning and knowing myself, I guess. Um, so I guess primarily like that. I'm like a mixture of things because it's like mm, I'm light and I'm dark, um, and everything in between. So I'm kind of um, getting used to that because I didn't used to live that way. I used to kind of reject parts of me. So I'm kind of using all that learning to integrate all that into my day-to-day life, I guess. Um, so yeah, I'm kind of that's how I am as a person, I guess. Um, what I do, I work as a psychotherapist, and um, I feel blessed to do that sort of work, working with people, um, and the sort of exchange of energy that I get from it, and um, yeah, I feel very grateful for that. I feel very fortunate to have found that path and to have done the work to enable myself to work in that. Um, it's not the only thing I like to do, but it's something it's a real passion. Is connecting with myself and connecting with other people and helping in some way. Um, um, as I speak about it, I feel kind of quite nervous, quite yeah, nervous about exposing myself or something. There's something around that that I'm feeling at the moment. Um, yeah, I mean, there's other things I love to do. I mean, I've a lot of interests. I love music. Um, I DJ. Um, which is yeah, there's something interesting about DJing because you're playing music with a crowd of people watching and wanting to dance. And my role in that is to kind of bring the energy to the party and to choose the right music at the right time. Um, so there's a lot of timing in that, and there's a lot of. It's interesting. I put a tattoo on my arm which says "breathe," which is good to do, but
Usually.
usually a good thing to do. And I tend to kind of take what I've learned in my work and bring it into other areas. And in DJing, it's like if I'm not grounded, if I'm not centered, if I'm not focused on the task, I don't connect. So I kind of learn from that. I don't know. There's a lot of crossover in the stuff that I do the outside of therapy.
It sounds something like presence and reading the field and those kinds of things.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of that, of reading the field, um, because it's um, actually, being in this interview reminds me of it a bit, because you kind of stand up in front of a crowd of people and you're deciding what to do, what to play, and so I tend to do a bit of planning before that and choose certain music and stuff. But really, it's responding to the field, because the people will either just stand there looking at you, or, which has happened to every
Oh
DJ,
no.
like you're playing music and you thought, I thought they were going to dance to this. Why
Hmm.
aren't they dancing? And so immediately, once I got out of that, out of the embodied experience, I'm into this mind game, and then it doesn't really go that well. So I put a tattoo here on my arm saying "breathe" with a pair of headphones underneath it. So it's kind of like something I can really relate to.
Mm.
That the
Yeah,
importance of breath and presence.
mm.
Um, Apart from that, um, I have a lot of interests, a lot of hobbies. Um, Being a DJ and being a therapist, I suppose it kind of lends itself to needing to do a lot of research and a lot of uh, work outside of that before you actually, before I'm actually working. So, I do a lot of that. A lot of my spare time is listening to music, and um, I love to play piano. It's almost like I don't know. I described it once as like, there's something in playing music of connecting with different melodies and different tones and keys that sort of um, provoke different responses in me. But it's really like, it's something I do to connect with myself. Like I can tell by the music I'm playing how I am.
Hmm.
Um, a lot of the times at the piano, I kind of go towards more reflective, slow, melancholic pieces with tinges of nostalgia and sadness. I've never been the piano player who's gone towards the allegre or the, I don't know, I don't remember the different names or terminology, but that sort of fast-paced lightness. It's almost like, it's interesting because I'm thinking about DJing, and people ask me like, what do you play? And I'm quite centered on a particular genre of music, which is techno. Techno has this like rhythmic patterns and sort of repetitive patterns. It's almost like I can get into a trance very easily with it, because there's that rhythmic drumming, which is sort of very close to like heartbeat,
Hmm.
BPM, or beats per minute. And so what's interesting about techno is that it's not a light genre of electronic music at all. It's quite
Oh.
dark. Um, it's actually very dark. And so I guess these sort of like, my interest like in that side is like, that's where, let's say, I get to know my darkness. Sometimes I'm playing music and I'm like, whoa, where are you going? But it's like, it's not like, I don't go out like some people. I see people DJing and they're playing like house and like kind of happier music and pop music and stuff like that. I'm like, that's not the part I need to delve into at this
Hmm.
moment in time. Who knows, in the future I could be playing something different, but it's interesting to talk about, because I'm kind of realizing as I'm speaking um, how much kind of I've tried to shine light on that and sort of bring it out, and used it as a way to connect with other people. I mean, um, I'm in Ireland at the moment, but I used to live in Mexico, as you know. So I kind of built up this, it was interesting because I built up this sort of community or support network of, and friendships with lots of different therapists, and that was kind of like a light side, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then on the other side, I had this very interesting community of electronic music and nightclubs and like late nights and literally the dark. It's at nighttime, and I'd be playing at, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning. And so it's like I'm really aware of that sort of balance that I've constructed, I guess. Um, so yeah, it's like it's a very interesting music. Um, I'm not sure what will happen, but I quite enjoy that. It's kind of like it's something that I do quite regularly. Is now with all the lockdown and so on, the nightclub industry, which I would have liked to have kind of investigated a little bit here, has been very much restricted.
Right.
There's a lot of I've done a few, what would you call that, like live streams and online stuff, but it's very different playing on your own in your sitting room when there's nobody there and imagining people listening than to actually be in a place where there's 100 people or 200 people responding. It's like
Yeah.
this exchange of
Yeah,
it's
the word that keeps coming up when I'm listening to you is resonance. It's like this full body resonance
Mhm.
in that seems
Yeah,
to be exchanged and get going.
yeah, and it's a real trip. It's a real I mean, I get so energized from it. I
Mhm.
get so energized, not just from the music, but the response um, I get. And it's a great challenge for me because every time I get up, I have that, like what I was talking about earlier, it's like getting up to show myself, you know?
Mhm.
And so, I specifically have this tattoo here to remind myself to just breathe into the experience and just how I'm feeling is okay.
Okay.
Um,
Hmm. Well, can I ask another question, or were you
I'm
at the
kind of
point?
working through that question because there's a lot of stuff. I don't know how much time we have or how you want to do it, but one of the things I'd love to mention, but there's lots of stuff I could go on and on about. But the question is, who am I? And like one of the things I've noticed being in this lockdown in Ireland, I'm fortunate enough to have a garden.
Hmm.
And one of the things that I've really drawn sort of strength from or something is that process of gardening. Um, which is interesting because I have another tattoo about that too. So I like tattoos too. But I have another tattoo which is basically about this idea of this need I have to tend the garden, which is, sometimes I'm not so good at it, but for the most part, I can see in the garden when there's a lot of weeds, it's a bit easier. It's more like an exterior representation of what's going on. And yeah, so like I'm kind of like living in the city of Mexico where I was there for 8 years. I didn't have so much access to any garden. I
Yeah.
had some plants and so on, but they were a lot easier to manage. But having a full garden during the summer is a lot of work.
Yes.
So I like to go out and I like to mind the garden, and I've planted some new things and taken out old things, and it's that whole process of just being with me. It's very meditative and therapeutic for me to kind of create space. Um, so I like to use that a lot to describe, I guess, the work I do and that I do with me and with other people.
Mhm.
It's like that minding our nature, you know.
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a significant difference having a connection to a grounded space than being in urban Mexico. I've been
Yeah.
noticing that quite a bit myself in lockdown in Mexico. So
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So
missing the earth.
Yeah, I've been blessed in that way. You know, I can walk out, but you know, all the sessions at the moment that I'm in are online. You know, so
Mhm,
there's kind of that need to feel some sort of connection.
mhm.
So I quite like to just kick off my shoes and walk out barefoot in the grass in between, and just that's been very helpful. And actually remembering that, and going, wow, I really need this.
Mhm.
That's that's been great. As you can probably tell, I'm in this process of like understanding myself more, because I'm in
Mhm.
this great adaptation process of like leaving one country and coming back to my country of origin, let's say, and seeing where I fit in. And
Yeah,
it's a roller coaster combined with like a lockdown. It's
yeah.
uh it's a very interesting moment in my life personally.
Yes, I can imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So another question that I do have is, and maybe it's right now, but I'm wondering what comes up for you as an event or a set of circumstances in your life that you would say have shaped who you are in some important way.
Mm, well, I was just discussing this with you before we started this interview, and it was kind of like, you know, I turned 40 in November in the midst of all this change. Like a couple of months before, I'd moved back to Ireland and I was traveling. I ended up going to the AGT conference in Budapest, and um, I wasn't really settled. So when I got back to Ireland and I turned 40, and I thought, I don't want to be here, so I'm going to go away. And I went traveling across the world. And I think what's I mean, there's so many different things that have happened that have kind of shaped me, I guess. Does it need to be one?
No, no, it can be various or a set of circumstances if they're sort of connected or ongoing or
Yeah,
whatever you'd
well,
like.
yeah, in terms of like, um, I remember like one moment that stands out for me. I've become a lot more spiritual, um, in the last few years, and I remember that was first sort of awoken in me, I suppose, was when I was traveling in South America about 12 or 13 years ago. And it was like the classic tale, like the European guy arrives to South America and goes, whoa, there's some different energy here that we don't have here in Europe, I mean. Um, or at least that's how I perceived it. And I did a trek, the Salkantay trek, which allows you to do like 5 or 6 days over mountains and valleys and all sorts to arrive finally at Machu Picchu at like 5 o'clock in the morning, something, hoping that you get this beautiful sunrise. And um, what I remember was I arrived there and I'd always thought about it and I'd seen books and read movies, but when I arrived there, it was the first moment I really felt this connection um, with the earth and with some sort of spirituality based around that and the universe and all this kind of stuff. And I remember sitting there, you know, thinking I was on my own in this experience, but I was with some guy from Spain. His name escapes me, but I remember sitting there and I turned to him and said, "How are you feeling?" And he responded. We had this great conversation. I realized I was like, "Wow, it's like if when I'm connected with myself and then I engage with somebody else, there's this like meeting or something." And in that contact, I felt like a lot of peace, a lot of yeah, it was a feeling of peace, and it felt like I was in this. I'm trying to think of how to put it. I don't know. Within that connection, I felt very calm and very kind of like, oh, I like being here, wherever there was. But it was in this moment of seeing this immense beauty. I mean, I don't know if you've ever been to Machu Picchu, but
Mhm.
it's like up in these mountain tops, and it's just this jungle all around of in Peru. And it was a sacred site. And that was the first moment where I really felt like, oh, there's something more that I can't see, that isn't tangible, that does make me feel good. Oh, this is strange, because I grew up in Ireland, so I was indoctrinated into the Catholic Church. Very soon, I was asking difficult questions to the priests in my school about, Catholic teaching, and I didn't understand it. I didn't understand. And so that, like, I didn't understand. I thought, well, what's wrong with me? Why can't I get it? And that led to some, teenage rebellion, and I stopped going to mass, and I kind of went, no, there's no God, and started exploring all these different things, and so when I was about 27, 28, when that moment happened in Machu Picchu, and I thought, well, actually, maybe there's a spirituality for me after all.
Ooh.
And so there's that, and then I kind of went exploring within and without, and I remember about, it's like over 3 years ago, when my sister passed away, and she was always like this great inspiration for me. I always saw her as like some other she had Down syndrome, so she was kind of like connected in a way that I couldn't really understand, but there was this great relationship between us. So when she passed away, everything that went with that, all these different emotions and all that. But I remember before that, I kind of realized, being in Mexico, I'd been sort of in contact with more esoteric sort of ritual and ceremony, and the Gestalt community, and all these different things that was causing a lot of introspection and movement and change in me. And I remember, so leading up to it, I was kind of prepared in a way. It's kind of like, well, I'd gotten around to understanding this, life, death, one doesn't exist without the other. And so I remember having this moment shortly after she passed away. I was back in Mexico, and I remember having I wasn't sure where she was, and I was like, well, hold on a sec. If there's another realm or plane of existence or something, surely I should be able to, like, where is she, And I remember getting a what do you call that? Acupuncture.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, oh yeah, that'll help with stress, and maybe I have some emotions that are trapped, and maybe that'll help release them or something like that. And what it turned into for me was, he started to put needles into my back and all this kind of stuff, and I just went into this sort of sleep, I suppose. And all of a sudden, I had this vision of my sister walking towards me, and so angelic, and she wasn't very mobile when she was alive. So when I saw her walking towards me, I said, you're walking? And she said, yeah, it's great. And she came over to me, and I remember just she was kind of stroking my hair, and I felt this kind of peace and calm. Went, oh, okay, just thank you for coming and reminding me that you're still here in some way. And so that moment, like, I remember waking up going, whoa, that was something. And that kind of connecting to my spiritual side, I guess, that's sort of, they've been sort of great moments for me, because it's like it's given me kind of purpose. It's given me some understanding of, why we're here, or why I'm here, or why am I doing this? Like, what's led me to be sitting here with people and holding space? What's that about? It kind of helped me a bit understand, like, why I always go around, well, not always, but I used to go around kind of asking, why can't I fit into, working in a bank and be okay with that? Or, so yeah, I guess those moments. I mean, there's lots of other things that have happened. I've lost people and relationships, and there's always a lot of learning in that for me. And it's like an ongoing process to understand. and to accept. But I think what's really affected me has been those moments of, whoa, like things I can't really explain. It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's a felt experience of spirituality.
Hmm.
Whatever, I'm not really sure how to define it, because I kind of enjoy all sorts of religious teachings and other non-religious teachings, and yeah, I guess they've shaped me where I am today. You know.
Okay. Well, another question, and maybe the answer is your sister, I don't know. But if you identify a person, another human being who you would say has significantly influenced you or shaped you in some way.
Yeah, well, my sister jumps out. God, there's so many people though. Um, yeah, I'm thinking about my family in general,
Mm-hmm.
my parents and my brothers and my sisters. Um, yeah, and maybe not with maybe not wanting to shape me, they have, I guess, or they have influenced me. Uh, but like sticking with my sister, because I try to honor her in many ways, you know, because she passed away, and so she was born with Down syndrome and with a lot of uh, physical issues, I suppose. So she had this life for 31 years of constant struggle to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that was hard to see. But at the same time, I always, I used to use this sort of idea that she was like the keystone in a, you know, like an arch,
Mm-hmm.
and the keystone is the middle one.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like in the family, there was three of us on each side, and she was the keystone that kind of kept us together in some way. When there was a lot of separation in the family, she would, by wanting to or not, she might get sick, or she might need us, or she might interrupt an argument, or, and we'd kind of come back to earth and go, oh,
Mm.
Trish, you know, that was her name, Trish. So she, yeah, she's had a huge impact. She still has. I mean, I am, speaking of my love for tattoos, I remember shortly before she died, I was speaking to her on Skype whilst I was in Mexico. I used to, you know, have conversations with her. And she used to always ask me, "Are you happy?" Which was
Mm.
her question all the time. It was almost like, "Are you happy? Are you happy?" Or even just happy. So I remember shortly after she died, I was like, I need to remind myself. So I put happy on my wrist.
Mm.
And as like, you know, as the whole grieving process happened, and um, you know, I got through different stages of it. I remember last year I got a tattoo with my mother of a robin. And we used to see the robin, or we still see the robin, as kind of like representing her in some way that she comes. So it was very funny to get a tattoo with my mom, who's 70. Well, she's
It's like
71.
fun.
But it was fun. We got a tattoo, and um, I guess I get like I could see she wanted that same sort of inspiration to just remind herself of somebody who, you know, I kind of get a bit, I don't know, when people talk about people with Down syndrome, they often talk about angels, and
Mm-hmm.
they're so innocent, and they're so this and that. And I kind of think, well, my sister was that and lots of other things.
Mm-hmm.
She could be like any other human, argumentative or bitchy or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but also full of love. And so what I took from her was this: her essence was love. She was very pure in how she treated people. She would meet people, and she had this way of making people respond or show their best parts or something. I don't know how to explain it, but it was so inspiring to see, because everybody was affected, I suppose, positively by her presence. So why I'm saying that is because I take that as a way to follow. You know, I'm kind of like, you know, describing myself earlier, a seeker, yeah, but maybe I'm a bit of a dreamer too. But I kind of think like we can always influence what's going on around us, and being me, and being how I am, in some way, like being love, has this impact on people. Being present with them, and I remember when she died, there was a funeral, of course, and I remember seeing the amount of people at her funeral, and it was like 1,000 people or something. We didn't count, but it was like a full church, very Irish I was going to say wedding, Irish funeral. People from all over the place are coming, and I remember arriving, and you know, I was with my brothers and my nephew carrying her casket to the altar, and seeing all these people, and I thought, wow. And I remember thinking about it and talking about it to my family afterwards, thinking, like, look at the impact she had on people. That is so inspiring. And like dealing with that and going through that process of her not being here physically, but still sort of feeling her in some way, and seeing how my actions are shaped by her, it gives me a lot of solace, gives me a lot of peace, because I sense that she's with us. I keep telling this to my parents, and they're kind of looking at me going, all right, hippie. And I'm like, well, no, I mean, I can feel her, and all this kind of stuff. But it's something that gives me peace in those moments where I'm like, God, I wish she was here. And I think, well, she is here, because I sort of embody what she was doing. I'm kind of like, well, look what she did. If she can do that with all the difficulties, with all the judgment of being somebody with a disability, I mean, what can I do? It's kind of inspiring. It's like, well, I could do, you know, imagine if your funeral has like over 1,000 people at it. That means the impact she's had on over 1,000 people. Imagine if we could all do that. So that's the dreamer part, kind of like, wow, the knock-on effect of approaching life in that way. So yeah, she's a huge ongoing presence and impact. So I'm grateful for that, for having her and my sister. I'm so grateful.
Yeah. So another question, and this one is, it's about a certain part of your identity, I guess, would be, how would you say that you experience yourself within your gender, or as a man, or in your masculinity, or however you would define that part of yourself?
How do I experience myself in my gender? Not sure how to answer that. I mean, being a man for me, it's been quite challenging to fit into this traditional idea of what a heterosexual man is. Because I felt kind of restricted a lot. I kind of had to move into the therapeutic world, and to find kind of, oh, I have a space where I can just, you know, be vulnerable. And even that is something I'm learning lately. Like I went through this period in my life where I didn't cry, you know, based on stuff I've been taught or shown, where I was, I don't know if I felt limited. I guess I felt limited. Yeah, well, I felt limited looking back, but I was trying my best. But I remember very recently kind of talking about masculinity, you know, and it's become such a big topic these days. The whole idea of there being a toxic masculinity, and so like being a man, um, and being a therapist and working, and like primarily I work with women at the moment. So I kind of realize that I'm a man in moments in my work, and then outside of it, I'm kind of like, well, what does it mean to be a man? Okay, what is that? I have to, okay, I have to be a certain way, or I have to, okay, I have to be tough. No, well, hold on, well, I have to be a provider. No, well, I better be steady. Or, so I've had to work through consciously all these different um, ideas of what it means to be a man. Um, and even studying in Mexico, I remember going into the first class in the institute where I studied and being surrounded by women,
Mm.
and thinking, what's the deal here? Why is there not more men here? That was the first experience, and I remember there was one moment I was studying, working with couples, and um, there was a debate about, we looked at gender issues, and I remember feeling very isolated because it was quite interesting. Within the group I was in, there was one man, um, who kind of was quite macho, was a kind of the typical Latin sort of, he'd make these comments that were kind of caused a bit of a tremor in the class of women. And then
Mhm.
there was me, and then there was another man, um, who's gay. And so it was just the three of us, and we were in a corner of the classroom. And I was kind of like, well, we're kind of, this is an interesting representation of men and then all the women.
Mhm.
And I remember there was a moment where uh, something was said. One of the women in the class said something about, well, you know how men are, and men are like this, and men are like that. And I sort of finally got the courage up to sort of put up my hand and say, well, hold on, not all men are like that. I don't consider myself like that. So I kind of, as I was talking, I felt like, you're trying to define who you are. This is way harder than the question was, or you're just trying
Yeah.
to say, hey, just like see me too. It's not just your idea of or your experience of men. Um. So yeah, it's an ongoing thing.
Mhm.
I don't know. I can't really define it. It's just I would like there to be um. I would like there to be a change in some way about there being more space for men's vulnerability.
Hmm.
That and at a kind of a, like, to be taught. I remember being in Mexico and working with men over there and realizing, wow, they are really well taught how to be the macho man. Like their schooling and training is unbelievable, which was coming from their father and their mother in many
Mhm.
ways, perpetuating that culture. And so I kind of saw my role then as modeling something slightly different, or allowing that space and seeing what happened. And so that was fascinating to be within like a culture like Mexico's, which is
Mhm.
different from here in Ireland. And, you know, having that sort of Irish reference, I suppose. I don't know.
And it's interesting because both cultures have that certain drive from the Catholic influence and
Yeah.
schooling and dogma, but it's
Yeah.
taken very different roads.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, that's how I saw it. You know, I came from a kind of a traditional family, unit, I suppose, where, you know, my dad was working, my mom's looking after the kids. So having to, I grew up with that model, and then trying to find my own model has been really interesting, really challenging, but I kind of have that drive to see, is there different ways, and you know, I've accepted that, well, there's nothing static about this. It keeps changing depending on where I am, who I'm with, or how I'm feeling. But
Right.
question though, I'd like to.
Okay. There we go. So we'll jump into another one, which is kind of
Right.
the meeting point, which is how did you get from all of this stuff and being you and all of these processes into Gestalt? How did you get there, and what is it that is most attractive to you within Gestalt?
Mm, well, I'm taking a big breath as I'm listening to it, and I listen to or thinking about the question, and it's that, is that like what attracts me about it is that awareness, a bodily awareness, and being present, um, and that contact with myself and then with the other, and that healing that happens in that connection, and I mean, I got into it in a quite funny way. I you know, like I studied, my degree was in English and history. I was
Oh,
an avid reader, and I loved the past and like different stories. And I remember I studied like ancient Japanese culture and the Dutch
okay.
colonizers of Africa, and really weird. I just sort of like, oh, I like, that's weird, and look at that. And so I was always curious about stories,
Hmm.
but they're sort of like, you know, with English, there was a lot of, you know, I quite enjoyed theater, and yeah, theater. I mean, I could talk about that for a while, but kind of like I enjoyed literature and that creativity and that storytelling, and um so, you know, that's what I studied, and then I was like, well, what am I going to do with that? Will I be a teacher? I don't know. What do I want to teach? God, I remember being a student and the teacher, and I used to be unruly in class, let's say that. And so I remember I started working, and I went from job to job to job, and I was a gardener, which is was probably one of the best jobs I had. I worked with my dad in the hospital, um, you know, and all these kind of jobs. I worked in construction, um, so like really hands-on bodily stuff. I quite liked that stuff. And then I studied sound engineering because I wanted to produce music, and I was like kind of looking for my creative space, but my job wasn't very fulfilling a lot of the time. So I remember sitting with a therapist after I'd gone through this moment in my life, and I sat with a therapist, and after about 6 months, I was sitting there going, you know what I'd like to do? And she said, what? I said, I'd like to do this, except, you know, the
The
other
other
way
side.
around.
Yeah.
I like this. This is something here. It's really, you know, I enjoy being a patient, but I wonder what's going to be like on the other side, you know? So, you know, I started investigating. I'd studied psychology in university, but I dropped it because I wanted to study history. So this is around when I'm like 28, 29. And I went to an institute here, which is more based on psychodynamic stuff. And they said, well, before you do that, you need to do this foundation thing because you're doing a post grad and all this kind of stuff. So I did a foundation, like a 6 month intense history of all the different models, you know?
Mm.
I was drawn towards the Jungian, I was drawn toward person centered, and I said, yeah, there's something there. What's that? And so I remember, like, I was studying in Ireland, and due to I, life meaning I met a woman I fell in love with,
Ah.
and we decided to get married, who's Mexican. And I decided to go to Mexico. And so I was like, well, I want to continue studying, but like, what the hell am I going to study in Spanish? I need to study Spanish first. And I need to, you know, I had some Spanish from my travels before, but to an academic level, I thought, So I remember being in Ireland and I was organizing a wedding, organizing a honeymoon. And I was like, well, I should kind of investigate. So I remember putting out feeler emails to different institutes. And the one that really responded was the institute in Mexico, um, the IHPG. And I remember getting an email and they're kind of like, well, you should investigate this because we do like a humanistic Gestalt model. And I said, well, what the fuck is that? And I started investigating. I was like, oh, that's interesting. What's that? That's sort of like, it really, really called me. There's something about that idea of like, if I'm aware of all sides of me, I can make a better decision. I can kind of not ignore that. I don't know, implement a better strategy or something, or manage certain situations better, or decide for me and not based on expectations of me, or um so I remember I went to the institute and I started studying, and I was just on this like, I was just blown away by all these different things. I was like, what? Like it was so not planned, but it felt right at the same time. It was kind of like, okay, experiment. And I kind of realized, wow, I really like experiments. I really like that. Well, I'm going to get in touch with my creative part, which is go into this situation and imagine, like, my Spanish was not great when I arrived. I arrived at Christmas time. I'll never forget it. I arrived at Christmas time and I was sitting with my wife at the time with her family, and they were, it was a Mexican Christmas dinner kind of thing where everybody's speaking at the exact same time in a different language. And I got so exhausted trying to follow what was happening, which I couldn't. I remember lying down on, right, I need to study Spanish. So I remember I enrolled in UNAM, the university there, or well, CEPE, which is the part that teaches you Spanish. And so I trained there and learned Spanish to a level where I was able to study. So it was that, I don't want to say it was an introduction, but it was kind of something I hadn't really practiced embodying an experience and allowing myself that. It was I was quite rational and quite like, well, it has to be this way, that way.
But that's a fun experience when you take away the structured language.
Yeah.
And you're just left in the experience.
Yeah.
And you can't just like fix it with words really easily.
No, and it was very interesting learning all this terminology in Spanish and seeing it practiced, and everything was in another language. And so everything I said, I was at that moment in my language development in Spanish, I guess, where I was still translating and still uncomfortable. Yeah, it was kind of like I had to think like 2 hours before I could make some sort of, I have a question and I'm quite nervous about it. And it got to the point where I need to explain this. So I was able to, at some point, find the courage to go, this is really hard for me. I can't keep up this pretense that, oh, this is fine. I didn't understand the jokes. I didn't understand some of the explanations. I didn't understand when we were doing practices where people would say to me quite colloquial terms from different states in Mexico, and I'd be like, what? Like, it took me a long time to realize what me cae el 20 means, which is like realized. And I was like, and literally it's like the 20 fell, or so I have no idea what it means even now, but people would use that quite a lot, and I'd be like, what is that? So it was, in order
Do you
for
want
me
to know what it means?
Yeah, go on.
It's the 20-cent piece falls into a machine and then it activates the machine.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Okay.
So like it's like all of a sudden boing, but it's because that 20-cent piece fell.
Okay, well the 20-cent piece just fell for that. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So,
useful information here.
Yeah, all I understood was literally, I realized. So even the training part and being exposed to all this this new knowledge and information was such an interesting, um, you know, cliche journey for me. But it was such
Mhm.
a, I was like, I'm going into myself and then going out into the world. And I remember each time I came out of the institute, it'd be like Friday night or some crazy times. I'd spend the whole day in these intensive, I'd be so exhausted. Because, you know, when Spanish wasn't it's not my first language. I'm at a good level now, but back then it was exhausting
Mhm.
because I was translating a lot of the time and then trying to feel how I am. So it was kind of, I was able to compartmentalize better than I could before.
Mhm.
And that invitation to feel and to be present
And it's
was
always fun having those therapeutic experiences in a language that you don't actually have the concepts for in your own language.
yeah.
Like I trained in Spanish as well, and I would blank. Like when I first started interpreting, I would blank. I was like,
Uh-huh.
I don't even know what that is in English because that wasn't part of my life. I
Yeah.
learned that and I lived it and I named it in Spanish. And I was like, whoa, now what is that in English? I
Yeah.
don't, not part of my life.
Yeah. And I
I don't know if you're
remember,
going through that now as
no,
you come
well, I'm
back into
going,
your
no,
English self.
I'm reminded of when, I'm not sure where, I'm a bit confused. Maybe you can remind me of when we actually met. Was it in Canada or was it in Querétaro?
It was in Querétaro in 2017 before Toronto. Yeah, a year
Okay,
before.
okay, that makes sense. So that was, you know, it was in Mexico and it was a lot of it, well, not a lot of it, maybe half and half of Spanish and English.
Hmm.
And I remember sitting in a workshop with Bud Feder and the
Jack.
name, yes, Jack.
Hmm.
And so suddenly I was meeting English speakers. And I thought, oh my, and you know, we suddenly were chatting, having a coffee, and like that, like I went, oh, it's in English as well, you know, because I had been reading in Spanish, I'd been reading translations from English into Spanish. I
Yes.
was like, dude, you could do this in English.
Yeah.
And I remember, like, since going to different congresses and so on, and meeting English speakers who are in this world, I thought, oh, there's a whole new
There's a
world.
whole other English world out there that you
Yeah,
didn't know. Yeah.
yeah, and I should brush up on all these terms and just read it in English too, because it was so interesting doing it in a different language.
Hmm.
Uh, I haven't really thought about it, but you can
Well, it's
relate to
cool
it.
because it takes away all of the preconceptions. Like
Yeah,
there's nothing. Like you're just this blank slate, and you learn the
yeah,
word, you learn the concept, you learn the experience.
yeah. And what was
It's
interesting for me is thinking, well, you know, a lot of the time I was kind of like, oh, I better not show them that I don't know how to say this in Spanish, so I'll stay quiet. And really, when I stepped into, well, I don't know,
hmm.
but I'm going to join in. I'm going to
Hmm.
say, I don't know how to say this, but I'll try. And that process of really choosing my words, maybe I didn't have the ability, but it was almost like interventions were a lot more concise.
Hmm. And that
You know?
it's a really beautiful Gestalt process, actually, when somebody's language breaks down, even
Hmm.
in their native language, and they have to make those same kind of choices. I love it when clients
Hmm.
are just like, or when that happens to me, it's like, oh my God, I don't have words for this. So let me
Yeah,
put it together.
yeah,
It's,
and let's see if we can let's see if we can communicate without words.
mhm.
And that sort of, I remember actually doing. I remember just saying that when you said that. I was thinking about. Uh, I had made one of these. I'd said, look, I don't know. I actually don't know what's going on. I was feeling quite stressed out. I was like, shit, I can't follow this. What's wrong with you, Ian? I know why. Be here. Hello, I don't understand. You know. And I remember they were asking, what's going on for you as this is going on. I said, well, and I got that, you know, and I was invited to just sit and breathe, and there was no pressure. There was no, like, time was put aside and just like, well, allow yourself that. And it was a really great moment where, you know, I realized a lot of stuff just from somebody saying, sit with yourself. I'm here. And that presence. And it was in front of loads of people. And I was speaking in a different language and I was in a foreign land. And I felt this moment of real connection with my experience, which I was sort of like, I can do it because I'm doing this and this, but I wasn't acknowledging that that's scary as well. And that's, you know, that I'm very brave and wow, I'm quite smart because I'm studying in Spanish and you're doing something new by just saying, I don't know what's going on.
And that sounds wonderful that there was no push to catch you up with the content and the words and the concepts and just stay in your experience. That sounds
It was
rich.
something very, very new for me, I guess, because, you know, I'd studied before and a lot of it was just information. And why don't you know the information? And it was that embracing the unknown or the not knowing or I don't have an answer. Okay. And that was very exciting for me. Um so yeah, I don't know if that answering the question, but
Oh yeah, yeah. It's
yeah.
answered about 3 or 4 of them.
Okay.
So how would you say that Gestalt has affected you as a person through all of these kinds of experiences?
Okay, I see the connection.
This is a new one. How would you say it's affected you as a person?
It's brought me back to my body in ways that, you know, other things I've done, like I have this back issue that's been affecting me. It's called coccydynia. It's been affecting me for the last couple of years. So that's really kind of brought me to like, oh, there's pain and it's a constant chronic pain. And how do I manage that? And I think that along with, I've always been, I want to be careful how I word this, but fuck it, I'll just say whatever. I kind of like, I've always enjoyed, no, it's okay. I'm just wondering where we were.
Yeah, the question that was really inspired, sorry, was how Gestalt has affected you. And you were just going to say something like really...
Really interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't know what I was saying, but what I would say how it's affected me is this whole bodily experience. You know, I kind of learned growing up not to show a lot of emotion or certain emotions. I guess that's why I found it difficult to cry or, you know, I went through a lot of difficult times growing up, emotionally. And I was always trying to find that space without knowing that that's what I was looking for. It's kind of like this something, I need, what is it? I don't know. And I no, that doesn't work. And I'll try that. And I'll try that. So I was always trying lots of different stuff, positive and negative. And I think what Gestalt has led me to really just, yeah, that whole embodiment thing of and integrating that information, like kind of being okay with, oh, I feel like that and it's okay. It kind of went beyond just my thoughts. It kind of went, well, no need to judge yourself for that. And I think like the world of Gestalt or whatever we'll call it, like I remember the first time I went to a Congress, I went to Taormina and I was just so overwhelmed. Okay, at the beginning it was very overwhelming because it's like 1,000 therapists. And I remember going there and I was with a colleague and we were kind of at the back at this opening ceremony. And I remember looking at her and going, I can't deal with this. This is too much. And like we were both supporting each other and like, you know, it's okay. I mean, it's just so overwhelming. The energy when there's a load of us together is insane. And this being the first joining and like it was just so much going on that I wasn't aware of, and then I was aware of, and like it's kind of allowed me to find different people to have in my life, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Uh, like that moment was a moment I went away with some colleagues from Mexico, and our friendships just grew and grew, and throughout this, 5 or 6 days or whatever we were together, and meeting all these people, I was like, wow, this is like a real tribe of similarly minded people, and we're kind of curious about all this, and God, it had such an impact on me that
Mm-hmm.
before that I'd had the Mexican experience where I was in this Mexican institute, and it was a Gestalt um, community there, and I was just like, whoa, who's this and what's that, and I had no idea. It's like what you're saying with this blank canvas. I had no idea who's who and who wrote what and why are they that. They were just all people.
Yeah.
And so as I began to make friendships there, I was like, wow, this is a different type of friendship. I'm not sure. I don't know what this means, and what I don't, like, a lot of uncertainty. But as time went on, and I got more and more in touch with myself and what my real needs were, I suddenly realized, wow, I'm finding a lot of joy in this. I'm finding a lot of kind of balance and harmony and learning and all this stuff that I really love about life, experience, and like, you know, when I would see people transform, and I'd feel myself transform through their transformation, and it was just so wonderful. I feel blessed to found that, because I'm not sure how many people find that. I'm not sure. I just feel blessed to sort of to go into my body, and that translates to better relationships and deep friendships and stuff I was looking for without knowing that I was looking for. It's kind of like I
Mm-hmm.
fell into my lap, just because, like, I had no idea what I was going to fall into Gestalt, and I did, and I realized, whoa, what is this? I could have fallen into any other thing, but that was what I decided to do,
Mm-hmm.
and um, yeah. So it's had this since I entered into this world of Gestalt. It's like transformed how I look at relationships, transformed how I look at expression.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, and I don't know. It feels good to talk about it, actually,
Mm-hmm.
to remind myself. I'm like, oh yeah, it's nice.
Hmm. And I'm wondering what one of your greatest memories would be, one of those sort of moments of fulfillment or fullness or a good story, something that comes to mind that you would say, wow, this is one of the high points in Gestalt for me.
Hmm. Okay, so I have two moments. I really enjoy telling stories. That's something else about me.
It's the English and the literature, I think, maybe, and the theater.
Well, also in Irish culture, there's this
Yes.
person of
Yeah.
the Shanachie, who was a great storyteller. They used to travel around Ireland and keep the culture going when we were colonized by the English. So I kind of really relate to this traveling Shanachie, or
Yeah, I've been sitting here, it's come through my head like 3 times going, wow, you're a really good storyteller. So there we go.
yeah. So
You're aware of that.
I really enjoy it. I really, I don't know, I really enjoy that. But anyway, I have two stories.
Mhm.
um, so I kind of touched on it before. When I was in Querétaro, I remember it was my kind of first experience with English-speaking Gestalt therapists. So I had gone to this workshop with Jack and with Bud, and I was just fascinated because Jack came up to me and he was talking to me about Irishness and, you know, I think everyone from the States has some sort of connection with Ireland, and so that's kind of something I can relate to a lot of this, because I was born in the States,
Hmm.
and when I was 4, my parents are both Irish. They went over there, had some sons, and came back to Ireland. So I kind of identify with different places, and I guess that's why I'm a bit of a nomad. And so, anyway, I'm in this workshop, and I was the only English speaker or native English speaker. I was Irish in Querétaro in Mexico in a Mexican congress, and we were doing a workshop on group therapy. And I remember for a practice we got, we're in the fishbowl, so I guess there was maybe 10 people observing and maybe 6 or 7 inside with Bud and Jack. And the whole idea was to keep it within the circle, what was happening there. And I remember that I had this great, Bud was like, I'll talk about it in a second, but because he's kind of involved in the next part. He was this kind of person who shot straight from the hip. And I hadn't seen that before in practice. I had, I guess, but in a kind of a Spanish version. But in English, when you depending on the language, there's certain ways of speaking, and
Yeah, it lands differently.
it lands differently, particularly when you're like, I understand every word and every intonation, or at least I think I do. And so he was going around the circle and saying, and just checking in how people are doing and really keeping it within that space. And he came to me, and I remember I said, well, I kind of feel like when I was in blah, 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 like that sort of blah, 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 blah doesn't help. That sort of outsider
Yeah.
in a group, which
Mm-hmm.
I obviously experienced being an Irishman in a Mexican context. And he caught me like immediately. He said, no, 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 no. I can't remember the words he used, but it was really direct. And it was like, stay here. It was very much assertive, direct. And that for me, like, just, how do I explain it? To see a man do that as well, to sort of stand into his power, it was really inspiring. And Bud was, I don't know what age he was then. This is only a couple of years ago. So he was quite elderly, and I used to see him sometimes around the Congress and stuff, and it's very really, interesting character. And I had no idea who he was, no idea. He was just this old man for all I knew. And I went, okay, well, I met this guy Jack, I'll meet this guy Bud. And I remember in that moment, I was like, oh, there's a way of doing it in English too, of it was almost like he translated this great presence from Spanish to English, and he was there, and he said, "Stay here." And I kind of went, "Whew, okay." And then he said, "How was I doing?" And it was really powerful. It was a moment where I was shown this this um, this way, and that really had an impact on me. So it leads me into the next story, which was a couple of years later, or a year later in Canada, where I went with some colleagues, and we arrived at the check-in, or the not check-in, that's for a hotel reception, I suppose. You were there.
I
Um,
was. I was at both of those reception tables.
yes, and yeah, I've met you at several reception tables actually. But anyway, this is the part I don't know when it was. There was just like a meeting about doing the process groups. So my first experience of a process group was in Taormina, where I was so overwhelmed and terrified because I sat down and they were doing the introductions, and everyone seemed to have opened an institute or have written 20 books, and I was just like, oh God, who am I, and all that. And I said, well, I'm me, and that's okay. And so kind of that understanding of myself within that context. And so so where was I? Oh, so I'm in Toronto, and I'm going up there with a colleague, and suddenly like she was helping organize the process group leaders and so on. And I had seen that and I went, I'm not ticking that box. Fuck that. But then when I got to Toronto and I was in the hotel, I met her and she said, "Hey, Ian, could you do me a favor?" And I said, "Sure. What is it?" She goes, "Could you be one of the group leaders?" And I went, "What? What? No, 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 no." You know, first response like, "No way." And then I went, "Well, actually, yeah, okay." And I remember I went into the meeting, which is about, I don't know how many people were there, 50 or 60 people, and I saw it as a great sign because Bud came in and he sat very close to me. And there was another man who sat beside me, and he was saying, "Oh," he introduced himself, and we had a nice conversation. And he said, "You know, my co-facilitator, facilitator, not leader, or whatever you call it, co-facilitator, had dropped out, and he'd gotten that message the night before, and so he invited me on this. He sort of said, "Oh, it'd be great if me and you could work together." You know, because we're chatting, it's going nicely, and so it turned out that way. I remember it was interesting because I saw Bud, and then I met like a woman from Ireland, and I was like, "Whoa, there's something going on here!" Like just from experimenting, just trying something new, and I felt like, "Oh, this is exciting," and so I became like a co-facilitator with this guy, and we did these groups, and it was just like so interesting. Um, so that was something, but then it led to when I was in Budapest last year, where I got an email and I was signing up for workshops and so on and so forth. And it was really funny. It's funny thinking back about it, but I was signing up and I ticked the box and I totally forgot I ticked the box. So when we arrived to Budapest, they're like, okay, all the leaders, all the facilitators, all the co-facilitators, and come to this group meeting. And I said, yeah, I'm not in that. Turned out I was, and I'd been assigned a group. And I remember this moment of arriving to the room. And I arrived a little bit late because I wasn't sure where my group was. And I arrived in, and everybody turned around, about 10 people, and said, "Ian?" And I thought, what? Why? How do you know my name? What's going on? And they said, "You're the leader. You're the facilitator of this group." And I thought, oh, okay. And I arrived completely unprepared and sat down, and they're all sort of looking to me like so what should we do? And I said, well, it's kind of a surprise to me. So why don't we just go around and see what it's like just to be here? And that was really exciting for me because I was kind of like, oh, life has invited me to play with this. I for whatever, hadn't checked that I was a facilitator. And I don't know, those sorts of, it's not one experience, but many different experiences of playing, of being present and just going with what is.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I don't know if it's fair to ask this next question, which is really the last one. Because if you're in the present and the being with what is, it's where do you think that you would like to be going in the future with this? Do you have any direction, or are you just kind of being? Or where do you think Gestalt should go is the other way you could answer that about yourself or about Gestalt.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting because I'm thinking about that idea of having a direction and then how that goes with just being. And I think that not having a direction has been a theme for a lot of my life, you know? Um, and now that I've found this work that I love, like it's great work. Um, for me, it really is. Um, it's hard and it's difficult and it's challenging and all that stuff, but it's like something that I love doing. So it doesn't really feel like work. I don't want to belittle the amount of work it takes to get to work in what we're doing. But it gives so much more than just being a job that I kind of think now, well, I need a proposal, I need a direction, I want targets, I want goals. And I've gotten more like that in the last couple of years. Before it was, what the hell is this? I'll just see and what's going on. And I'm doing a lot of personal work in order to be prepared
Mhm.
and continually preparing myself and changing, expanding. And so that had kept me very present. And now that I took the decision to leave Mexico and come back to Europe, and I'm going through this kind of accreditation process and um, different processes I'm going through. And, we've had this situation this year where everything's on pause, and it's given me a lot of time to think about where I'd like to go, where do I see myself. And I suppose I see what I would love to do is to continue growing and to offer that, and to serve, and to give, and to teach, to write, to give workshops in different areas that I'm interested in. At the moment, I'm extremely, like, I seem to be heading towards doing quite a bit of couple work at the moment, and I'm intrigued about working with groups. It's kind of like something I'd really like to experience. I've had it before because I was a teacher for a lot of my time, teaching English in Mexico and in different Latin American countries. So I was always interested in that group dynamic, and being a therapist in training and then being a therapist as I was teaching, the classes, I began to explain to them, I'm not so sure how much English we're doing here, but they were all so excited because it was this kind of just meetings.
Yeah,
Uh,
my ESL classes would go off the rails like that too.
oh, like way off. Suddenly they'd be like, what are we going to talk about today? And so I was learning all the while, not necessarily in a therapeutic context, but in a group context, what it's like to work and,
Yeah.
and work with the energy of a group, and notice how I am and notice how they are, and there's so many different skill sets I'm employing, and it was so exciting. I'm not sure how much English they learned, but I think we all learned something, and it was something really in that I'm really drawn to, and certainly in studying, like in the last few years, I've gotten really into studying different um, shamanic traditions and healing models and all sorts of stuff. It's, for me, it's all connected, and there's a lot of that
Mm.
about. I remember speaking to a shaman friend of mine, and he said to me, he said, like, I know what I'm doing here. I'm like a spiritual guide. And that sort of took away oh, okay, the whole shaman thing is all that. And when he said that about being a spiritual guide, I was fascinated by it. And he said, well, in just, I could learn from that. I really love learning from different areas. I'm a football fanatic. Um, so I've watched how groups would work together, and training and preparing and all this different stuff that goes with a sport like football. And so that would come into the organizational part of it. And then I'd see my shaman friends working, and I'd be part of the group. I'm like, wow, look at the way they're actually employing parts of Gestalt. And this is within ceremony. And I thought, well, like, there really are no limits to what I could do with this, really. Uh, so I guess, I mean, to answer the question, I would like to just keep expanding, and
Hmm.
and and to be open to that, and to I don't know, the word flow is used a lot, and I wasn't really sure what it meant. So I thought, what does it flow like a twig on a stream, or something? It sounds quite passive.
Mhm.
And one of my great teachers and friends, Norberto, told me, he said, like flowing is doing what needs to be done, nothing more, nothing less. And that sort of gave me a purpose to, okay, in order to mind myself, I need to do this. I should meditate. I should do exercise. I should eat well. I should sleep. I need contact. And it was not pushing it too much. It wasn't
Mhm.
running against the river, or swimming against the river, or whatever analogy I'm trying to make. Uh, but doing what needs to be done, and that gave me a different way of looking at my day-to-day activity.
Mhm.
Because it's been quite difficult, like shifting from one experience in Mexico of of being married and then training and then working and setting up this whole life, and then deciding, okay, I'm going to go to Ireland where none of that is, and what's that going to be like, and going through that process of adaptation and um, reintegrating and seeing things with different eyes and all that stuff, um, combined with COVID-19 and all that that's meant, and all the change and movement and all the energy that's being released with all these different movements, and yeah, I don't know. I just want to kind of keep curious and retain that. I like the idea of waking up each day and it being new,
Mhm.
and being able to connect with how I am, and that flowing idea of doing what needs to be done. And so far, that's helped me quite a lot. This isolation, like it's been, God, I don't know. We're going to see this impact for many years to come. I think it's
Yeah.
just so strange. We have to meet on like this, and
Mhm.
and meet our clients like this, and it's like transformed so many things. So it's like it's I've learned a lot of self-compassion
Mhm.
and self-love, and what I really uh, want to say is it's when this first started, everybody there's been different moments that I could sense where people are like, yeah, we can do all this with all this time, and then there's troughs, and then there's like peaks, and then everybody's like, what is going on? And that was
Yeah.
translated with all the different things that were coming up in my work with different people, and I'm like, oh my God, the anxiety around all this, and so intense, everything. So I kind of go back to the idea of just doing what needs to be done, listening to myself. If I need a day where I'm just working, that's great. If I need a day where I'm just sitting in the garden, that's great. If I need a day where it's sort of just
Mhm.
responding all the time. So I'm quite enjoying that. It's not easy, as you know, because we're another human. I think everybody's going through all these things, but I think my nature of being curious has allowed me that little kind of window of, well, let's just see what happens. It's not all doom and gloom. Let's see what comes out of this, and
Hmm.
I kind of feel like I'm answering your questions, and then I'm like, when I'm finishing, I'm like, what was the question? But
No, no, you very artfully managed to answer pretty much all of the questions.
okay,
So, if that's okay with you, is there anything else you'd like to add, or would you like to leave it here for now? Not saying I don't ever want to speak to you again, just to close this piece
that's not
out.
gonna happen. But I'm just very grateful to you for inviting me to this, and um, it's been a very nice conversation. It's very. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, but I was open to it, and then actually going through it, it's a very interesting introspective process.
Thank you.
So yeah, thanks very, very, very much. And
I appreciate it, and thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.